and greetings on the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. My name is Janita Gurung, and I work with the Transboundary Landscapes program here at ICIMOD, and I will be moderating the event today. Today's webinar, Towards the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, Retrospective Reflection and Setting Priority Actions for the Mountains, is organized by the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. Here, I would also like to acknowledge UNDP India, with whom we are working on the CBD Secretariat-funded project on Aichi Target 11. The Hindu Kush Himalayan countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan are all parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity and are committed to its biodiversity targets. The Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020, with its embedded Aichi biodiversity targets, was the overarching global biodiversity framework to implement the CBD. The world is now preparing to adopt the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework 2021 to 2030 in the upcoming 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the CBD, scheduled to be held later this year from 11 to 14 October in Kunming, China. In today's webinar, we aim to achieve the following objectives: to discuss priority actions and targets for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, with special reference to the program of work on mountain biodiversity, and to also share our success stories and good practices related to the achieved targets. And now, please allow me to briefly introduce you to our in-house technical team. Looking over IT and communications are Saeed Muhammad Abu Bakar, Grace Rajapandadi, and Indu Chitrakar. Nakul Chetri and Sunita Chowdhury have curated this webinar, and I am moderating the event. I now request our Director General, Dr. Pema Gamsho, for his welcome remarks. Dr. Pema, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Janita. Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, Executive Secretary to the Convention on Biodiversity, distinguished delegates and representatives, focal persons from the member countries, dear participants and colleagues. On behalf of ICIMOD, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, I have the honor to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar towards the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, retrospective reflection and setting priority actions for the mountains. It is such a great honor for us to receive a message from His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Nepal. This is, in fact, a testimony to the importance that he places in biodiversity conservation. I would also like to acknowledge the support and commitment of the Executive Secretary of the Secretariat to the Convention on Biological Diversity for kindly consenting to give her remarks at this webinar. Today, the 9th August, is also the International Day of the World's Indigenous People. Let us celebrate this day by reflecting on the contributions of indigenous people towards biodiversity conservation in the spirit of the CBD's objectives, which emphasizes on the conservation of biodiversity, its wise use, and benefit sharing. Though the mountains of the world and the Hindu Kush Himalaya are rich in biodiversity, they also have high rates of poverty. The theme for this year's International Day of World's Indigenous People is leaving no one behind. Indigenous people and the call for a new social contract. It is high time for us to relook and revisit our development pathways so that growth is inclusive. The world's biodiversity hotspots are all centers of linguistic and cultural diversity. And the HKH is no exception. We have over 1,000 living languages. Yes, that is 1/6 of the world's living languages, and they are a rich storehouse of indigenous knowledge. Both the biological and cultural diversity of the region are threatened, and today is a good day to remind ourselves of this impending loss. It is unfortunate that we seem to have fallen short in meeting our conservation targets of the decade, which was set in IT in 2010. As I understood, none of the targets were fully achieved at the global level. The Hindu Kush Himalaya, as you know, is a cornucopia of the natural capital. Its benefits are not just shared across Asia, but also globally. Therefore, it is our obligation to understand what we have been able to achieve over the last decade and reorient our collective efforts to identify gaps and priorities and contribute towards the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework being drafted. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all of us now are beginning to acknowledge that human activities are the major drivers of biodiversity loss and climate change. The impacts of climate change are becoming clearer, and the COVID-19 pandemic is a timely reminder that we need healthy ecosystems. We also know that the HKH region has many conservation champions who have inspired others through their work. We'll be hearing about some of them from our delegates today. In the process of drafting the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, mountains are still not getting their due attention. We hope that this webinar will highlight this urgency and help us communicate a strong and common mountain voice. As a specialized mountain-focused knowledge organization in the region, with support from member countries and from other agencies, including international organizations, we have been advocating for greater attention to mountains in general and the Hindu Kush Himalaya in particular. Based on our HKH call to action, we are making a concerted effort to put up a united voice through our HKH to Glasgow campaign at COP26 of the UNFCCC and through our pathways to CBD 15 at COP15 of the UNFCCC. In both these UN fora, it is our aim to highlight the need for urgent actions to address climate change and enhance technical assistance and financial investment in the region. Therefore, this webinar is an important stepping stone to highlight the plight of mountain communities from the HKH and Asia at COP15 and at COP26. ICIMOD is privileged to have strong friends and partners who share our concerns and have worked with us to advance the mountain agenda. It is our privilege and honor to be part of the regional assessment of IG Target 11 in Asia through the generous support of the CPD Secretary, the Government of Japan, and UNGP India. We hope that such collaborations will be further strengthened in the coming years. At this juncture, I would also like to convey our sincere appreciation to all our development and conservation partners from the region and beyond. We believe that ICIMOD's continued commitment and contribution to promote sustainable development and biodiversity conservation will make a positive difference in the lives of the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain communities. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by reiterating that the HKH region, home to the highest mountain in the world, is a unique treasure trove of biodiversity. In fact, we refer to it as the pulse of the planet because we believe that what happens here is an indicator of the health of the global environment, including the state of its biodiversity. I'm confident that this webinar will contribute meaningfully towards identifying priority areas for global diversity framework over the next decade, especially for mountain biodiversity. I wish you all interesting and fruitful deliberations. Thank you, Namaste, and Trashitele.
Thank you, Dr. Pema, for the very warm welcome and for the important messages on biodiversity for the HKH. The Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Ms. Elizabeth Aruma Mirama, could not join us today due to the significant time difference between here and Montreal, but she has shared her recorded message with us. So I request Race to please play the recorded message of Ms. Mirama for our participants.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. The world is reeling under a severe biodiversity crisis. Important ecosystems are being significantly altered. The COVID-19 pandemic has reaffirmed what we already knew, that biodiversity is fundamental for our survival on Earth, and has added a higher level of urgency to the need to protect it. The impacts of biodiversity loss, land degradation, and desertification, as well as climate change, are now the greatest global environmental challenges of our time. They pose a huge threat to our achievement of living in harmony with nature. Unfortunately, as they worsen, these crises reinforce each other. Unless we break this vicious cycle, they will keep undermining our efforts towards achieving sustainable development. Mountains are not immune, as they too suffer from these challenges and overexploitation. Convention on Biological Diversity parties have long recognized that protected and conserved areas constitute important stocks of natural, cultural, and social capital, yielding flows of valuable goods and services that benefit humanity. It is also recognized that these areas deliver multiple benefits, especially when effectively managed and governed with inclusiveness, transparency, and equity measures, with full participation of indigenous peoples and local communities and youth, among others. The importance of mountains is well known. Mountains encompass some of the most spectacular landscapes. They feature a great diversity of species and habitat types, with a high level of endemism and diversity and distinctive human communities. They cover at least 22% of the world's land surface, and they provide habitats for about 1 billion people. Additionally, half of the world's biodiversity hotspots are concentrated in mountains, which support about 25% of terrestrial biodiversity. Very importantly, by providing 60 to 80% of all freshwater resources for our planet, mountains are known as water towers and fulfill the needs of more than half of humanity. Mountains matter for disaster risk reduction, water and food security, tourism, youth and indigenous peoples and local communities that carry with them a wealth of traditional knowledge. People in lowlands, downstreams also depend on these services, including opportunities for recreation and spiritual renewal. Despite many challenges, the world has made some progress on the implementation of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity and the UN Decade on Biodiversity 2011-2020. Perhaps most importantly, there is a growing concern in society about environmental issues, especially among the younger people. This determination helps in promoting a green recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and allows for more ambitious conservation targets in the post-2020 decade. That said, I'm pleased to report that we are on track to fully meet at least the 17% of terrestrial component of the Aichi Biodiversity Target 11 on protected areas and other effective area-based conserved measures. We are also likely to soon cross the 10% threshold for marine protected areas, thereby also achieving the first of the 169 targets under the Sustainable Development Goals. This shows that with coherent and concerted efforts by all, globally agreed targets can be achieved, reiterating that protecting nature is of overriding importance, meriting bold and large-scale commitments and following through with their implementation. I believe that these discussions and your resolutions will tremendously benefit not only the regions in question, but other regions as well, thereby contributing to the achievements of the relevant targets of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The Post-2020 Framework is our roadmap. Its implementation is a necessity for the future we want. Urgent efforts are required. The next 10 years will be most critical of our generation. Without more determined action, biodiversity loss will continue. We will see an increase in environmental threats and climate-related challenges, including natural disasters, drought, desertification, food shortage, water scarcity, wildfires, sea level rise, and depletion of the ocean. Protecting and effectively managing mountains will contribute to the solutions by lessening the risk of increases in poverty, hunger, water scarcity, among other issues during the post-2020 period. Hence, the organization of this event is very timely. I extend my appreciation and gratitude to ICIMOD and other members of the organizing committee. Initiatives such as this help to encourage the engagement and willingness of parties to act. However, it is one thing to commit, quite different to implement. But when we commit, we must implement. Let us collectively strive to prevent future COVID-19 type pandemics and ensure that we can live life in harmony with nature. Our majestic mountains represent life. We must therefore protect them. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Ms. Marema for your message and your recognition of mountain biodiversity within the regional and global context. The Right Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, Shri Sher Bahadur Deuba, is unable to join us today, but it is our privilege to share his inaugural remarks for this program. I now request my colleague, Dr. Vinay Pasakhala, to kindly read the remarks from the Right Honorable Prime Minister Deuba. Vinay, over to you.
Greetings. I'm very happy to send my greetings to the representatives from the Hindu Kush, Himalayan and South Asia region attending this important meeting on towards Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework, retrospective, reflection and setting priority actions for the mountains. I would like to highlight the importance of mountains and its diversity for prosperity of current and future generations among the representatives from the Hindu Kush, Himalaya and South Asia region. Nepal is a host country of International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, and we are committed to protecting, conserving, and sustainably utilizing biodiversity for the prosperity of our people. Mountains host exceptional biodiversity that is critical to achieving a sustainable future for humankind. Mountains are also the source of livelihoods for billions of people. However, our mountains are under increasing human pressure resulting from land cover change, climate change, and unsustainable exploitation of resources. Our commitment to protecting mountains is well reflected in our conservation success. We have been successful to achieve zero poaching years for the tigers, rhinos, and elephants. We have also increased our protected areas, showing the world that green growth is possible. Nepal strives to achieve sustainable green economic growth through wise use of its natural resources. We recognize that economic growth would be sustainable only if we conserve our environment. Nepal and other countries of the Hindu Kush Himalaya are endowed with rich biological diversity, and they have tremendous potential in reshaping people's livelihoods, economic base of the region, and the future of humankind. As the Prime Minister of the host country of ICIMOD, would like to thank all the 8 member countries of the region, our development and conservation partners, for their support, and local communities for their sincere efforts to conserve and sustainably use mountain biodiversity. In the upcoming United Nations Biodiversity Conference, we need to have a common regional voice on mountain biodiversity and strongly put forward our voice to conserve and manage mountain biodiversity sustainably for building resilience to different disasters, including climate change. Let us join our hands together for conservation and management of mountain biodiversity for us and our future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay, for reading the message from His Excellency, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba. We will now begin the technical session, and I request my colleague, Dr. Sunita Chowdhury, Ecosystem Services Specialist, to make a presentation on CBD implementation in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, a retrospective reflection.
Thank you so much, Dr. Janita. All the distinguished delegates, Dr. Pema, all the representatives from the organization from the Hindu Kush Himalaya and South Asian sub-region countries, and also from abroad, from UNDP, Ms. Hina Ahmad. A very good morning to you all and namaste. So today I'm going to briefly highlight the implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, highlighting how we have made progress in all the 20 Aichi biodiversity target in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. And in addition to that, I'll also highlight about the Aichi Target 11, which we have a joint project with CBD Secretariat and UNDP India focusing on Aichi Target 11 for the South Asian country. So as we all know that in 2010, 196 countries came together and made a commitment and adopted the strategic plan for biodiversity for the whole decade from 2011 until 2020, which really set the target, 20 targets, and committed that they will take the effective and immediate actions to halt the loss of biodiversity so that all the necessary policies and actions are in place and also implemented by the end of 2020. So with this, the plan really made very specific goals and targets. So we have 5 goals and 20 targets under very 5 arcing goals. And the first one is the addressing underlying causes. And this really focuses on trying to address the causes like limited awareness, limited values integrated in the policies and also incentives and subsidies eliminated. The B really focuses on trying to reduce the direct pressures and also at the same time promote the sustainable use. And it has 6 different Aichi targets to contribute to the goal B. The goal C, we have focused, the plan has focused on improving the status of biodiversity by focusing on increasing the quality and qualitative status of protected areas across the globe, and also focuses on threatened species. And the last one for goal C is trying to improve the genetic diversity and preserve the wild diversity of the domestic plants and also wild animals and plant diversity across the globe. And this D really focuses on trying to benefit, conserve the ecosystem and share the benefits to all, including men, women, and the most marginalized group of the society of our global world. And the last one is to enhance implementation, which focuses at the policy level, focusing on national biodiversity strategy and action plan, traditional knowledge, science and technology, and also financial resources. So why we really need to have this assessment for the HKH region? We have already heard from Dr. Pema and also Madam Mrema that mountains really matters. So, and now why this is important in this now, because for the last decade, we have already committed that we will do this for all the 20 targets. And in 2020, the Global Biodiversity Outlook was published, focused on a very rigorous and review analysis of the global biodiversity targets for the whole world, for the 196 countries. And then based on that, now we have the very first draft of the Post-2020 Biological Diversity Framework that guides us, that will implement the financial resources and our actions for the next decade from 2021 to 2030. And then that will be adopted in the COP15, which is supposed to be held in October in Kunming, China. So, but why we really want to do this in the region? As we know that this region is very unique in terms of biodiversity. We have more than 400 protected areas. We have 4 biological hotspots, and this is the pulse of the planet. But at the same time, the mountains are not very well reflected in the strategic plan. And we really need to have this regional voice in the upcoming United Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, China, so that we, the region, get more attention. We implement actions and plans to conserve our biodiversity, but at the same time to prosper the economic growth and also sustain the livelihoods of the people and all the countries in the region and beyond. So that's why with that aim, we really assess a very rigorous assess, and we try to see the progress made by all 8 countries for over the last decade. And we try to see that what is the status of each Himalayan countries and what are the trends in each 20 targets. And based on that, we have tried to identify the gaps and challenges. We also tried to see what are the links between these IC targets and how we can contribute towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And based on this, we really want to recommend actions so that we commit to the better implementation of the CBD in the region and beyond. So here, before going to the findings, what we like to highlight that, so this is like, we have tried to, though there are the 20 targets, but each of the countries have established their targets by their own context, by their own capacity, by their own different factors within the country. So 20 targets have been contextualized to each of the countries. And if you see that out of the 20 targets, around 70% have been well aligned with the global targets. And there are 32 targets which are not well aligned, but they have been reflected in the other targets. I also want to highlight that the indicators, because we have so many indicators and each of the country has set their own indicators to reflect on the status and the progress made in each of the targets. So here we do not have the one very concrete goals and actions for each countries, and we have different varied actions, but they are directly and indirectly contribute to 20 biodiversity Aichi targets. So for this, what we have done is like we basically the analysis is based on the 6th national reports submitted by the CBD, which was submitted in 2018 by each of the countries of the HKH region. But at the same time, we also referred Global Biodiversity Outlook 5 and also Biodiversity Indicator Partnership indicators, which are affiliated by the CBD Secretariat, and they are helping to create the indicators for the countries and also for the global organizations and regional organizations to take reference of that indicators and use that. And this is the standard lesson that has been provided by the CBD, which are the criteria for us to analyze the targets. So based on it, we have analyzed all the targets of all 8 countries and prepared this report. And the reporting, we have followed the format followed by the GBO, Global Biodiversity Outlook. Now the findings very briefly, and I'll start from the global scenario. So here at the global scenario, Dr. Mrema already said that we have not been able to achieve, but there are some very progressive work done, especially in the Aichi Target 11, which was reflected. So none of the targets have been fully achieved, and we are already like facing a lot of the biodiversity loss, especially extinction, which is also well reflected by the IBES 2020, 2019 and 20 report. But there have been some progress at the global scale, especially the biodiversity awareness has improved quite a lot, and the people and the organizations have been able to integrate the values, social, cultural, and ecological values also at the country level into the policies and also in the day-to-day life. And protected areas, Target 11, and traditional knowledge have made quite good progress over the last decade. However, more effort is required in sustainable production, habitat loss, agriculture, organic agriculture, and also target threatened species. So as you can see, over the last decade, we already have like 20,000 species plus in the list of threatened species, which really shows that the species are going towards the direction of extinction, and we really need effort to halt this loss. However, at the regional review, we are very progressive compared to the global review. We have like already 8, though there are 8 targets have not been fully achieved, but we are in a very progressive pathway. Around 11 targets have already been about to achieve, and we have already achieved one target, Target 17, which is the National Biodiversity Action Plan and Policy, which was already adopted by 8 countries and also implementing well on time. So we can say that the Hindu Kush Himalaya region countries is towards the progressive path. And when we see this is the target, in terms of target, I already said that 17 is quite we have achieved, but there are some targets which need more attention. For instance, the biodiversity values, Target 3 is biodiversity values integrated in policy. So we need more attention on that, especially on biodiversity. Also 6, this is the freshwater sustainable fisheries, and this also requires a lot of attention in the region. And also in the 12 threatened species requires a lot of attention, and also Target 10 is vulnerable ecosystem, which requires specific attention to halt the degradation of our critical ecosystems such as freshwater and other ecosystems. So I will brief the progress made in each of the targets by the 8 countries according to the goals. In the goal A, we have 4 targets. The first one is the awareness. And if you can see, this target has been partially achieved. The green one is already on target, on the pathway to achieve the target. So Pakistan, Myanmar, India, China, Bangladesh, well on track. Bhutan is also very well on track, but they have very high set criteria, saying compared to the global target. But all of these are there doing very well in terms of awareness. In terms of values mainstream, all the countries are doing good. Well, this is not achieved, which is very hard. There are some ongoing work like biofilm, biodiversity, the economics of biodiversity ecosystems are going on. But more needs to be done in terms of values integrated into policies, but also practice at the ground level. The third one is also not achieved, and we are a little bit behind on incentive. We and some of the countries are really doing well, but some of the countries are we need more attention on this. And this is the very place for like 27% of industry adopting sustainable in the we achieving the target, and we need to be private sector on board. And that law
Sunita, your voice is breaking up.
The deforestation has significantly reduced with increase in fragments there, like now going on.
Janita, I think you have to step in.
Yeah, Sunita, your internet is breaking. Can I ask you while you present?
Sunita Dudi, can you leave and join the meeting again?
Hello. Sunita, you breaking up?
Please leave the meeting and join again.
And we have IT support. And in the meantime, what I would do is, so Dr. Pema, can you hear me clearly?
Your voice is also breaking up a bit.
Oh,
Can you come again?
okay.
Now is better.
Okay, let me turn off my video. And can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yeah.
So in consideration of time, if Sunita is going to join us again, what I will do is I will take this program forward. I will just put a pause on Sunita's presentation. So we will come back to Sunita's presentation. But in the meantime now, I would like to start the panel discussion, highlighting progress made on the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020, and setting priority actions for Aichi Target 11 and program of work on mountain biodiversity from each country. And I will be calling the countries in alphabetical order. So we have a total of 60 minutes for the session, and I really request our distinguished panel speakers to please present your brief highlights in 6 minutes. And any queries or comments to our panelists can again be written in the message box, and we will take them forward in the Q&A session. So to begin with, I will now request Mr. Jalaluddin Nasseri to share the country highlights from Afghanistan. Mr. Nasseri is the Environmental Protection Agency and the primary national focal person for the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Mr. Nasseri, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan commends the ICIMOD for taking this initiative and bringing together stakeholders from the Himalayan Hindu-Kush Himalayan countries to discuss the first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We hope the outcome of this webinar will help the Hindu-Kush Himalayan countries to shape their joint position for the final consideration at the 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties. Generally, the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan support the proposed structure of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in Draft 1. With outcome-oriented goals for the state of biodiversity and action-oriented targets that measure intervention for conservation, sustainable use, and sharing of benefits. Furthermore, we welcome the role of local community as well as the adoption of traditional knowledge with the frame of Afghanistan environment law to successfully achieve the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. However, we believe challenges exist which require the international community's attention to achieve the ambitious goals set by the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including meeting previous international commitment and creating enabling environment for accessing bilateral and multilateral funds. In light of climate and human-induced pressure, the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan called for reversing biodiversity loss to be complemented by action target to halt human-induced extinction and to prevent the loss, fragmentation, and degradation of ecosystem. Moreover, biodiversity and ecosystems are impacted by instability and conflict throughout the world, including Afghanistan. The government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan recommend and advocate for the consideration of long-term impact of conflict within the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We request from the Hindu Kush Himalayan countries to support in promoting our position in the upcoming CBD negotiation. In addition, we recommend the Secretariat to address critical gaps, for example, risk to human health from exploitation and threat of biodiversity in highland of Central and South Asia, and also establish technical expert groups, including qualified experts from civil society, to promote nature positive goal for net gain of natural ecosystem. We request from the Secretariat to identify the national and international biodiversity finance shortfalls in the highland of Central and South Asia to achieve the 2050 vision and to meet the 15 goals of Sustainable Development Goals. Afghanistan set its 5th National Indicator inside International Indicator and report on Sustainable Development Goal based on that indicator. We are pleased to present at this meeting that the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, under the leadership of National Environment Protection Agency, has been taking the necessary steps to align country's strategy to accommodate the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This includes revising the Afghanistan's National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan through adoption of the whole of society approach. With this in mind, NEPA with its international partner have conduct regional consultation meeting with all stakeholders, including specific consultation meeting with women, youths, and religious scholars throughout the country. Finally, on behalf of the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, I would like to thank you, the esteemed organization of ICIMOD, to launching a very important webinar on Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nasseri, for this message from Afghanistan. I will now move towards Bangladesh, and I request Mr. Zahir Iqbal for the country highlights from Bangladesh. Mr. Iqbal is the Deputy Conservator of Forests at the Forest Department, Ministry of Forest and Environment. However, I noticed that he may not have joined us. And if he is not here right now, I will move on to the next country, and if he does join us, I will come back to Mr. Iqbal. So I will now move to Bhutan, and I request Mr. Yeshi Dorji to share the country highlights from Bhutan. Mr. Dorji is Assistant Environment Officer in the Biodiversity and Land Use Division, National Environment Commission. The screen is yours, Mr. Dorji.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm greetings from Bhutan. The Royal Government of Bhutan would like to thank organizer ICIMOD for this very important webinar on Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework, retrospective reflection and setting priority actions for the mountain. And also for opportunity the broad plan for biodiversity 2011 and our priority actions and targets for post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. To state Bhutan's progress towards the implementation of a strategic plan, Bhutan updated the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plan (NBSAPs) in line with the strategic plan in 2014. We developed our national targets using the strategic plan and its Aichi biodiversity targets. The national targets are developed taking into account national priorities and capacities with a view of also contributing to the collective efforts to reach the global Aichi targets. For Bhutan, we adopted the updated NBSAP as a policy instrument after endorsement at the highest level, the National Environment Commission, chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister, as a testament of a strong political will and a national commitment towards the biodiversity conservation. We used the updated NBSAP for the integration of biodiversity into national development, accounting and planning processes through integration during the implementation of 11th five-year plan and also during the planning process of 12th five-year plan. We submitted our 6th national report by the end of 2018, providing review of progress in the implementation of strategic plan and Aichi targets based on information concerning the implementation of NBSAP. For Bhutan, we has made a significant progress towards the achievement of all 20 targets. Bhutan has exceeded the targets for 11, management of protected area system, and 16, implementation of Nagoya Protocol, while targets 4, 7, 12, 13, 17, and 18 are on track with good progress. We have made some fair progress towards the rest of targets. Today, as we are building and recommitting on the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020, as we gear for the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to guide our actions over the next decades, we believe in accelerating and scaling up our collaboration for ambitious, clear, and common targets for a nature-positive world. For Bhutan, as a country falling entirely in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, with an ecologically rich mountain biome, we stand firm in our commitment to the development and the full implementation of an ambitious and transformational post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as a key instrument to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. We are also placing a special emphasis towards the milestone and targets in reference to mountain biodiversity. To highlight our action for the post-2020 GBF development, for Bhutan, the National Awareness Workshop on this global process was first conducted in December 2020. The important national stakeholders were informed on the important global process and update of Zero Draft Framework. The most recently, the Secretariat of CBD has released the first detailed draft of new GBF, with draft framework to further undergo refinement during the online negotiation in the coming days before being presented for final adoption. It provides us a perfect opportunity to discuss our priority action and targets with our national stakeholders and today with our regional stakeholders. For this, in our country, we have planned a workshop in coming week to provide a platform for the national important stakeholders to brainstorm, discuss, and debate on the various milestones and targets reflected in the first detailed draft. Through this workshop, most of the country's priority action and targets for the post-2020 GBF with reference to mountain biodiversity will be discussed. For us, with ability to enhancing the ecosystem integrity and protected area nearby. However, given that more than half of Bhutan's total land area is already under protected area, with the constitutional mandate for 60% of our total land under forest cover for all, and our carbon neutral commitments, our special request were on receiving support towards strengthening its management effectiveness, implementation, and financial sustainability to be included in new GBF. Thank you, La.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorji, for the progress highlights from Bhutan. I will now move on to China, and I request Professor Yang Yongping to share highlights from China. Professor Yang Yongping is a professor at the Kunming Institute of Gardening and also the director of the Xishuangbanna Tropical Botanical Gardens, Chinese Academy of Sciences. Professor Yang Yongping, the screen is yours.
Yeah, dear Janet and Dr. Pema Chanchu, the DG of ICIMOD, it's a great honor for me to say on behalf of China to say two things. The first thing is about the architect. We also have an analysis. We almost very appreciate the regional analysis. Yes, China actually is we almost met the 13th target, but we not finished another 4 target, especially for the sustainable management and aquatic living resources. And the target 9 is invasive alien species prevention and control. And then the target 10 is ecosystem vulnerable to the climate change. And then the target 12 is reductions of risk of the extinction. So, so China actually is taking the active role for the global environmental governance, and also we will the effect of the national park system and carry out the major biodiversity conservation program, and also the social participation for public awareness, especially in the coming, we said 14 5-year plans. This is on the agenda. And China also will strive to peak the carbon dioxide emission before the 2030 and achieve its carbon neutrality before the 2080s. And for one thing, from the COVID-15 outbreak is last year. China is the authority is adopted the decision to banning illegal trade and also consumption of the wildlife. Now it's a very strict the regulations for the wildlife. This will be good things is for the protected the wildlife. So this is some words I would like to say is based on our analysis of the target. The second thing is last December is our President Xi Jinping is joined to the Biodiversity Summit meetings, and he sent the invitation to all of the participants to join to the COP15 in Kunming, China. Under I have we also organize one that we call the side meeting. The side meeting is the regional biodiversity conservation and cooperation. This is organized by the Xishuangbanna Tropical Botanical Garden and also Department of the Eco-Environment of Yunnan Province. This is only one of the 3 is the side meetings is really organized by the local organization. We very much like invited ICIMOD to be also a co-organized this is a side meeting, and this will be happened. Original is to the end of the August, but now it's because the pandemic is a lot of it's not finalized. It's still to keep it open, and this is a regional biodiversity conservation and cooperation, the side meeting. We will much like to share the knowledge and with the countries from the ICIMOD member country, especially from South Asia and the Southeast Asia's country. And we selected three subjects. The one is the conservation status, opportunity, and the challenge. And for this is a regional exchange and experience sharing for the biodiversity conservation. And then secondly is very much like to highlight the topic. It's called the public participation and the benefit sharing. And then the last is how to set up like the regional cooperation mechanism. And I know the ICIMOD actually have a lot of the experience. Is for the transboundary biodiversity conservation and the landscape management. So this is usually we hope the ICIMOD will contribute for this is a side meeting. So these are two things I would like to highlight here. And we are as the local and in Yunnan province. We very much expect your participations and online or offline for the COP15. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor Yang Yongping, for the highlights from China, and also for highlighting our experience in transboundary landscape biodiversity work. I will now actually, instead of going forward, I will go back a little bit. Before I go forward, I would like to go back to Bangladesh. We have a delegate from Bangladesh, Mr. Muhammad Jahidul Kabir. He is the Deputy Chief Conservator of Forest, and he will present the highlights from Bangladesh. Over to you, Mr. Kabir.
Thank you very much. As per the Bangladesh is concerned with the HKS countries, Bangladesh is endowed with a very rich biodiversity of flora and fauna in a wider range of ecosystems. The economy of the country and the people, as you know, are heavily dependent on the biological resources for their lives and livelihoods. As we are committed to conserve our rich biodiversity and used sustainably, we are fully dedicated to implement CBD in Bangladesh for our generation as well as our future generation. As you know, our constitutional commitment, Section 18A, the government is committed to conserve the forest, wildlife, and biodiversity for the future generation of the country. So our commitment for CBD in last decade was guided by National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan in line with the 20 biodiversity targets. Now I'll give you update about the key highlights of the progress of Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020. Bangladesh is very pleased to the achievement made on Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020 in the last decade. Out of 20 Aichi biodiversity targets, 10% have exceeded its target, and 60% of the targets are on track to Aichi to achieve the set target, and 30% are progressive towards pathway requiring more action. In terms of HKs, the Chattogram Hills fall under the geographic boundary of the region. The country has specific strategies and actions for conserving and managing Chattogram Hill tracts. Major threats in the hills include land use changes, habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution, migration, and natural hazards. And of the record also, the socio-political condition of the Chittagong Hill tracts. We have strategic actions to address these threats, including assessment and monitoring of species, invasive alien species, and land covers as well. Restoration has been key action in hills. For instance, about 10,015 hectares of lands have been planted, including restoration of degraded lands, About 95,000 hectares of forest land has been reported to be in improved condition in the Chattogram Hill Tracts in last Bangladesh Forest Inventory as per a report. So that's the key highlights for the last decade. And now priority actions and targets for post-2020 biodiversity framework with a special reference to program of work on mountain biodiversity. Our specific focus for post-2020 global biodiversity framework will be on conservation and sustainable use of ecosystems, including the Chittagong Hill Tracts. We will prioritize Chattogram Hill Tracts, all the targets of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework to increase the resilience capacity and support livelihood of the people and green growth. Within this upcoming decade, we'll declare more protected area in this Chattogram Hill Tracts region, and we are planning at least 3, covering an area of 2,000 square kilometers. Bangladesh has identified biodiversity and nature-based solution as one of the priorities of the country. PAs have been incorporated into different national plans and policies. Also, South-South and regional cooperation for conservation and management of biodiversity would be our priority. Regarding the wildlife crime control, we are closely working with Kathmandu, the Southern headquarters, and also with the UNODC and the our bordering country, India, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. So we have a lot of success for wildlife conservation, and we are planning in upcoming days to strengthen these activities in the Chattogram Hill Tracts region. As such, we are committed to contribute towards conservation and sustainable mountain development of Bangladesh, as well as in the HKH region. Thank you very much for giving this the opportunity to update in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kabir, for sharing the highlights and also the priority actions from Bangladesh. I will now move forward towards India. And Dr. Kerketa, thank you so much for your patience. Dr. Kerketa is the CBD Primary National Focal Person for India, and he is also advisor to the Government of India's Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Dr. Kerketa, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much once again. I would like to thank ICIMOD for organizing the such kind of first workshop, particularly for mountain biodiversity. And ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows that today is the World Day for Indigenous People. And the webinar of today is also to discuss priority actions for IG targets and program of work on mountain biodiversity. And it is really fitting to the day that is for indigenous and people, that is World Day for indigenous people. And I congratulate ICIMOD. At the beginning, I would just, since the subject is on, our topic is on mountain biodiversity, I would be concentrating on mountain biodiversity vis-a-vis with post-2020 global framework. You may be knowing that India is playing an important role in preparatory process in post-2020 biodiversity framework, and believes the post-2020 biodiversity framework must have coherence with and reflected in the 2030 agenda for sustainable. And we have already started our preparatory process, and we believe that it has to be participatory, inclusive, comprehensive, transformative, catalytic, knowledge-based, transparent, and iterative. And for your kind information, some kind of tracking mechanism for reviewing the progress incorporated in the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework. More importantly, the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework process must take into account the need for integrating the means of implementation and resource mobilization in the framework. Today, my topic would be on the progress so far India made on Post-2020 GBF, particularly on Himalayan biodiversity, and also I will be covering ESZ, which is also, that is eco-sensitive zone, which is also part of my Himalayan biodiversity. And last but not the least, Aichi target 11 and 16. These are the three topics, or these are the three main issues I would be discussing. First, India has so far organized 11 regional level meetings. Particularly, the theme are mainly on forest ecosystem and conservation, marine and ocean ecosystems, inland water ecosystem, floral diversity, and faunal diversity. And to organize the 11 such regional level consultations, the leading partners are UNDP, WWF, GIZ, and then CIA, and many more. And for your kind information, the recommendation, whatever the recommendation we are going to get it from, our outcome we are going to get it from these 11 such regional office meetings. These would be, again, we are going to place before the state levels, public, national levels. And for that, we have already decided the three key theme areas like Himalayan biodiversity, and those states which would be covering or which are part of the Himalayan biodiversity, those states would be taking part on the consultations. Third is marine and coastal biodiversity. The states which are touching upon all the coastal areas would be part of these consultations, and remaining states which are not part of either the Himalayan biodiversity nor the marine and coastal biodiversity, those states would also be taken care of. And the theme would be mainly on health issue, and for Himalayan biodiversity, the theme would be mainly on flora and fauna biodiversity. And for your kind information, let me tell you, the second issue is that eco-sensitive zone, that is in short it is called ESZ. ESZ primarily it is in order to provide a better sanctity to the protected area like national park, sanctuaries, and also to strengthen the buffers and corridors area around the PA network, that is the protected area network, but also to check the negative impact of industrialization and unplanned development in and around protected areas. So this part also covers some of my mountain biodiversity, not exclusively the mountain biodiversity, but some area also covers mountain biodiversity. And for your kind information, as far as our government is concerned, so far we have declared 425 eco-sensitive zones, and those eco-sensitive zones we are going to have it part of our protected areas, and they will also form part of our OECMs. And now let me tell you one more thing, that regarding OECM, so far Government of India has reported around 27% of the geographical area, 22% is the terrestrial, and 5% is the coastal area. And I must intimate the August gathering that now we are revising the OECM categories, which work is in progress. Total, we have identified, earlier it was 8 areas, if I am not wrong, I think 8 areas were there, but now we are revising into 11 areas like biodiversity parks, industrial estate for conservation purpose, village communities, public community lands. This third one, that is village communities and community land, again it forms the part of my Himalayan ecosystems or Himalayan biodiversity. And we define generally that this is the common lands or natural and or modified ecosystem containing significant biodiversity values, ecological services, and cultural values owned and controlled by revenue department, but in addition, voluntarily conserved by local communities, both sedentary and mobile, through customary laws or other effective means. So for your kind information, we have not forgotten to include the mountain biodiversity. So this also form part of that one, because if you go to northeast, there are a lot of areas where village communities have owned it, but it is neither included in the forest area nor in other areas. So those area also we are going to have it as our protected area without having any duplications. Then fourth is sacred groups. Sacred groups is again also, it is either in the terrestrial area or also in the mountain areas. So those area also we have tried to include it. Wetlands, lakes, reservoirs. This was earlier not there, but this has been made part of our protected areas. Then sixth is important bird area and important bird and biodiversity areas. Seventh is our urban trees and forest, urban greens, public city forest, urban city gardens. Then eighth is again agricultural heritage systems. This also would also form part of our Himalayan biodiversity. So we have not forgotten that agricultural heritage system would also form part of our OECM category. Then private forest, again also there private forests are there, which we actually we have defined like this. Private forest means forest which is not the property of the government or over which the government has no proprietary rights or to the whole or any part of the forest produce of which the government is not entitled. So this also would form part of OECM, and also this would also form part of my Himalayan biodiversity. Then 10th is private sanctuaries, because the sanctuaries which as per the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 have not been declared. So those, some of the private sanctuaries are being owned by the private people. So those area also we are going to make it a part of OECM as protected areas. 11th one is the coastal and marine areas. Just I brief you that we have, as of now, we have reported 27% of our geographical area to WDPA. Out of 27%, 5% is the coastal and marine ecosystems. So what I would like to say that India has also taken lead role in conserving the mountain biodiversity, indirectly or directly, starting from Jammu and Kashmir to the northeast area. With this, I would like to thank the organizer and also thanks once again for giving me an opportunity to speak. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kerketa, for the highlights from India, and particularly for highlighting your work on OECM. I will now move to Myanmar, and I request Dr. Thong Nen U to share the country highlights from Myanmar. Dr. U is the Deputy Director General of the Forest Department, Ministry of Resources and Environmental Conservation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Director General of ICIMOD, the Executive Secretary of the CBD, CBD focal person, and all the relevant institutions, distinguished delegates, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Very good morning and also very good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to extend my warmest greeting to you all. It is indeed my great pleasure and honor for having this opportunity to give some our reflection on behalf of the government of Myanmar as well as the CBD focal point of Myanmar at this very important event. I also would like to express my sincere thanks to ICIMOD for kindly inviting us to participate in this webinar. This webinar is very important to reflect our the actions for the mountains with regard to the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Likewise, I would like to also express our very sincere thanks to ICIMOD for presenting the very interesting regional analysis. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So please allow me by welcoming the first year of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, GBF, as a major step towards the securing a crucial global biodiversity agreement. The draft Global Biodiversity Framework contains many elements necessary to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. So Myanmar strongly support the target 3 of the GBF for conserving at least 30% of the land areas and sea areas globally, especially areas of particularly importance for biodiversity and its contributions to the people. The Myanmar also welcomed the inclusion of the need for equity managed, protected and conserved areas, which is in line also with the ICIMOD target 11. This target is also in line with the essence of the program of the work on mountain biodiversity on establishing networks of mountain protected areas. Taking this opportunity and linking to the previous targets, I would like to share our efforts of biodiversity conservation in terms of establishing protected areas in Myanmar. As you may already know that Myanmar's 30-year National Forest Master Plan set the national target of protected area system coverage at 10% of the country's land area by 2031. Currently, 46 protected areas, about 6.08% of the country's area, have been established from the northern alpine forests to the southern mangroves and tropical rainforest. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the restoration is one of the actions in the program of the work on mountain biodiversity, especially in the areas where mountain biological diversity has been degraded significantly and where restoration is needed to complement and buffer the protected area network, which also aligns with the ICIMOD target 14 and 15. In this regard, Myanmar are really supported to the target 2 on restoration of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is to restore 20% of the degraded freshwater, marine, and terrestrial ecosystem, ensuring connectivity among them and focusing priority ecosystems. Myanmar have been implementing Myanmar Reforestation and Restoration Program, in short, MRRP, study from 2017 to 2020-27, with the support of our government. Likewise, we have been also implementing re-establishing natural habitat program for the wildlife conservation, which started from 2019 to 2020-29, in order to strengthen sustainable forest management, restoration of degraded forests, accelerating biodiversity conservation, improving rural community, and mitigating the climate change. So, as you already know, the mountains are the key center for biological and cultural diversity and influence the climate at many scales. So, forests are an integral part of the mountain ecosystem and significantly contribute to the key ecosystem services, including climate change mitigation and adaptation. In this regard, Myanmar warmly welcomed the target 8 of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework for minimizing the impact of climate change on biodiversity and contributing to mitigation and adaptation through ecosystem-based approaches. In addition, in line with the ICIMOD target 50 on the enhancing ecosystem resilience and carbon stock for contributing to the climate change mitigation and adaptation, and to combating desertification. The government of Myanmar is fully committed to climate change mitigation, biodiversity conservation, and combating desertification. As a party to the Paris Agreement, Myanmar has developed the nationally determined contribution NDC and committed to undertake a series of actions to demonstrate their commitment to climate change mitigation and high option for adaptation. Recognizing the important role of the forest, Myanmar's NDC mainly focused on forestry and energy sectors. For example, in the case of the forestry sectors, the government of Myanmar initiated the action on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, replaced forest law enforcement, governance and trade, FLECT, and Myanmar Timber Legality Assurance System, MTLS. So, ladies and gentlemen, the mountains are home to the indigenous peoples and local community whose livelihoods, strategies, food system, and cultural identities are intimately connected to the mountain environments. In view of this, Myanmar supports the component of indigenous people and local communities in the draft Global Biodiversity Framework on effective management of biodiversity and equitably and effective participation of decision-making related to the biodiversity. They also align with the action related to indigenous people and local communities in goal 1.3 of the promoting sustainable use of mountain biological resources in the program of work on biodiversity, which are also relevant on IKI target 18. In this context, Myanmar have enacted the Conservation of Biological and Protected Area Law in 2018 to embrace the local communities in the forest and biodiversity conservation and management. In this new law, community concept protected areas have been included in one of the categories of protected area systems of Myanmar. So Myanmar is also participating in line with this, Myanmar is also participating the Landscape Initiative for Far Eastern Himalayan Highlight Program of the ICIMOD. Under this highlight program, Community Information Resource Center, CIRC, a platform for community participation in biodiversity conservation and sustainable livelihood development, is being established. So in the Forest Law 2018, the Conservation of Biological Diversity and Protected Area Law 2018 and Community Forestry Instruction 2019 are being exercised as a legal frameworks for the forest, biodiversity, and livelihood improvement of the local community. So to conclude, I would like to inform you that the Myanmar priority actions for the mountains towards the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework are establishment of protected areas, restoration of natural habitats and degraded land area, minimizing climate change impacts to mountain ecosystems, and recognizing the role of indigenous people and local communities in conservation. We are also promoting nature-based solutions in mountain conservation, such as restoration, protection, wise use of natural resources to ensure nature's contribution to people in a sustainable manner. We, Myanmar, warmly welcome the international support and collaboration so that we can strengthen our efforts to protect the integrity of the mountain ecosystem. Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
For the progress highlight from Myanmar. I would also like to inform everyone that today we do not have delegates from Iran, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. And also, if you do have any queries to our panelists, please write them in the message box on the side. I will now move on to Nepal, and I request the CBD Primary National Focal Person of Nepal, Mr. Dhananjay Paudel, to share the country highlights. Mr. Paudel is Joint Secretary and Chief of the Environment and Biodiversity Division at the Ministry of Forests and Environment. Mr. Paudel, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Janita. Respected Director General of the ICIMOD, Dr. Prema Gyamtso. Respected Executive Secretary of CBD, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema. Respected CBD focal points, distinguished delegates from Hindu Kush Himalayan countries, ICIMOD colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to ICIMOD for organizing this important webinar and providing me an opportunity to share progress and priority actions, especially for the mountains. Nepal is a Himalayan country, and the entire territory falls in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Nepal is endowed with exceptionally rich biodiversity, supporting the livelihoods of millions of people and providing a base of economic growth, prosperity of the nation. We are therefore fully committed for the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, and strive to achieve the sustainable economic growth, prosperity through the wise use of our natural resources. Now, I would like to share key highlights of the progress on strategic plan for biodiversity of Nepal. Nepal is proud of the achievements made on strategic plan for biodiversity in the last decade. The Nepal National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan progress has been assessed against 58 national indicators for meeting the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets, ABT, under 5 strategic goals. The assessment revealed that out of 58 targets, 3 targets were achieved before deadline, 2020. 12 targets were on track to achieve by 2020. 38 targets were towards progress, but at an insufficient rate, and there was no overall progress for 5 targets, especially target 6 on fisheries. For example, Nepal already exceeds the global target with 23.39% coverage of its land under protected area system. We have adopted landscape approach and corridors in the country for better conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem services. As of 2018, more than 88% of the country's land is under landscape level conservation, including Kanchenjunga landscape and Kailash sacred landscape initiatives. We have also exceeded Aichi biodiversity target 13, that is on genetic diversity, before 2020. However, we need more efforts in some targets, such as target 6, sustainable fisheries, target 2, biodiversity mainstreaming, target 8, pollution, and other targets. Regarding priority actions and targets for Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, with a special reference to program of work on mountain biodiversity, our specific focus for Post-2020 GBF will be on conservation and sustainable use of mountain ecosystems. We will prioritize mountain across all the targets, but especially on target on vulnerable ecosystem, habitat loss, fragmentation and degradation, protected areas, with a particular focus on management effectiveness and other effective area-based conservation measures, OECM, threatened species and ecosystem resilience. Our priority actions for Post-2020 GBF would be to align national targets well with the NBSAP, National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, and global targets. Transboundary cooperation and collaboration needs to be strengthened further, and building capacity of stakeholders, including community institutions, on biodiversity conservation and its sustainable use will be on priority. We will put strengthening and managing biodiversity knowledge on our priority. The mountain communities have also been traditionally preserving their religious and cultural heritages. We will also prioritize target on traditional knowledge. Leveraging funds for mountain conservation and sustainable use by improving efficacy of the existing finance solutions, finance instruments, and redesigning and implementing new finance solutions would be our another priority area. As such, we are committed to contribute towards conservation and sustainable mountain development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Potter, for the progress and priority targets from Nepal. I will now move to Pakistan, our final HKH country, and I call Mr. Naeem Ashraf Raja, the CBD Primary National Focal Person for Pakistan, to share the country highlights. Mr. Raja is the Director of the Biodiversity Program, the Biodiversity Director of Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Janita. Thank you very much, ICIMOD, DG ICIMOD, Executive Secretary, CBD, National Focal Points from the region. Thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to actually attend this very important webinar. Pakistan is committed to conserving its biodiversity, and we had our first biodiversity action plan prepared in 1992. Our current biodiversity action plan and strategy was prepared in 2017, and it extends up to 2030. We have aligned our national biodiversity strategy and action plan with sustainable development goals, and instead of keeping it to 2020, we have kept it to 2030, which is the deadline for meeting the SDGs. As you know, in the region, the priorities for conservation to some extent are similar. We are countries which are increasing, the population is increasing and it's putting pressure on our natural resources. So overall, protected area system in Pakistan, as you may be aware, is that our forest cover is very low, which is about 3 to 4% of the total area. And most of the forests, as you know, are concentrated in our mountainous regions. We have best examples of West Himalayan temperate forests, and then also we have nice alpine pastures in the north. And the most important thing about the mountain ecosystems are that they are the regulators of our water, because they are the catchment areas and they regulate water. And the protection, any conservation activity done in these areas also impacts the populations living downstream. So we are focusing on our mountain areas, and some of the very important biodiversity areas like Western Himalayan temperate forests are located in the north of Pakistan. Besides the traditional protected areas approach, we are also adopting the community-based conservation approach. You might have heard of our conservation program. We are running a trophy hunting program, and in that, the communities are protecting the ecosystems, the landscapes, and then as an incentive, the caprine species are used in trophy hunting, and the profit generated from those are actually being used by those communities. 80% of the revenues generated in this way go to the community, which is actually spent on restoration of the ecosystems and the social development of the communities. As you know, we have achieved the protected areas target mostly because, I'm sure that this is the case in the rest of the region as well. That was the easiest target to achieve. Basically, you have to declare an area as protected area, but that does not mean that that area is actually protected. So in that regard, we in Pakistan believe that unless the custodians of that area are thoroughly involved in conservation, the area cannot be effectively protected. So we have initiated certain, incentive mechanisms to involve the communities. We have run a major project in these areas, Mountain Markets project, which is based on the marketing of medicinal plants from the area, and that has proven very successful because unless the communities' livelihoods are improved, the communities are not motivated to actually join the conservation efforts. So in this regard, Pakistan has very good examples. We also have community-based organizations working in the area. We have Aga Khan Rural Sport Program, and we have national rural sport programs working in our mountainous communities. And the communities themselves, and now under the current government, the priority is Green Pakistan. So we have 10 billion tree tsunami program in which restoration of ecosystems and ecotourism are the key points we are focusing on. Regarding the post-2020 framework, I think it's very important that we try to incorporate the things which we think did not, which were actually restricting us from achieving the Aichi biodiversity targets. And the major concern there is the financial mechanism to underwrite the conservation activities. That's why I think most of the regional countries are now stressing upon the need to have a financial mechanism to address the post-2020 biodiversity challenges in place. We want to have a proper financial mechanism in place so that all the parties can achieve their targets in biodiversity. And in this regard, I think the regional cooperation is also very important, and transboundary conservation measures and transboundary conservation areas can also play a very important role. And again, I thank you all for providing us opportunity to interact. And this is really very good to have a regional perspective, which can actually help in our national planning as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rahman, for the progress highlights and the information from Pakistan. We have our final panelist, Dr. Ruchi Pant, Chief Climate Change Resilience and Chemicals Management at UNDP India. I request Dr. Pant to share the highlights from UNDP India. Dr. Pant, the screen is yours.
Thanks so much, Janita. Good morning and good afternoon to the CBD National Focal Points, senior government representatives, ICIMOD colleagues, members of civil society organizations from the South Asia and the HKH region participating in today's meeting. UNDP would like to take this opportunity to convey our appreciation to the Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba, the CBD Executive Secretary, Ms. Elizabeth, and colleagues at ICIMOD for leading this important conversation today on priority actions and targets of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in the South Asia and HKH region. In the context of today's conference, I would like to share 3 key points. 1, the need for resource mobilization as an integral part of achieving the proposed post-2020 targets. 2, while of course, as Mr. Pema said, that most targets have not been achieved, but they're all equally important. The need to focus on the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 3, which builds on Aichi Target 11, but when achieved will help in achieving a few other targets from the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Let me begin by speaking on the second point first. As CBD's Secretariat's co-coordinator for the South Asia Regional Network for Aichi Target 11, along with ICIMOD, in the last 2 years, UNDP has supported 9 governments in the region by building capacities of the CBD national focal points and their representatives by sharing experiences from India related to other effective area-based conservation measures. We have heard that while Aichi targets have not been achieved, working towards achieving Target 11 has helped countries in enhancing achievement of the quantitative and qualitative elements of Target 11. It is also understood that in most developing countries, further expansion of protected areas is going to be a challenge. So these same countries have a huge opportunity. We have just heard Pakistan talking about community initiatives, community-based conservation approach. There is a huge opportunity in all these countries to use the alternate channel to achieve the new Target 3, which relates to OECMs. UNDP India has worked closely with the Government of India in developing criteria and guidelines for the identification of OECMs in the country. As part of this work, UNDP, along with the National Biodiversity Authority, also engaged with experts from other conservation institutions such as WWF in identifying and mapping OECMs in India. India also has a program on awards, India Biodiversity Awards, through which process Government of India and UNDP have been able to gather about 700 nature-based solutions from across the country, and we scanned through this repository to also identify potential OECMs. UNDP also connected with the WCMC to understand the requirements and the process for reporting OECMs to the World Database on OECM, and has created a cadre of trainers in India who could help further identify OECMs in the coming years. And not only for India, but we can provide this service to the neighboring countries as well. As a result of this exercise, Government of India was able to submit 20 cases of OECMs to the World Conservation Monitoring Center before or by 31st of December 2020. India also reached out to the CBD national focal points of their other countries in the region through various platforms. Some were through webinars, online capacity building meetings, and also at the CMS COP, which was held in India last year in February. We also arranged we arranged a side event which was attended by or graced by our Honorable Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and also by the Executive Secretary of CBD Secretariat. So countries have made substantial progress in meeting the Aichi Target 11. Even Sunita from ICIMOD mentioned that in her presentation. Hence, we feel that it's only a slight push that is going to be required now for the countries who are already in the momentum of achieving Target 11 earlier, and now can easily achieve Target 3 for the new from the new targets. Just by looking at OECMs, so which is a huge potential, in the coming years. And another thing we have noticed is that while achieving Target 3, countries will be able to achieve other targets also. So if we focus on one, it's like multiple co-benefits. For example, we found Target 1 on spatial planning, Target 2 on ecosystem restoration, Target 20 on traditional knowledge and education, Target 21 on equitable participation and rights over resources, among others. Now coming to my first point, which is on resource mobilization. As I said, it's equally, I think it's very important to achieve these targets. So UNDP has a global flagship program called Biodiversity Finance Initiative. We call it BioFin in short. And this is being implemented since 2012. And we are supporting 40 countries, which also includes 4 countries from the region, India, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And in this, we are also helping countries in demonstrating and implementing innovative solutions for mobilizing resources for conservation. So we offer this help support to the other countries in the neighboring region. So this recommendation has also come out from the 2020 CBD expert panel on the resource mobilization, which has called upon countries to develop a national biodiversity finance plan. This is for the first time that countries are actually now developing national biodiversity finance plan, which can be linked to the NBSAPs that we just referred to. We are now going to be working on the next gen NBSAPs. So it's also important to have a resource mobilization plan or a biodiversity finance plan attached as an annexure to the NBSAPs, which will help in achieving the targets, the ambitious targets. And in conclusion, for this region, as I said, that we are reaffirming UNDP India's continued support on experience sharing and whatever expertise we have, and especially on OECMs and BioFin. Finally, I would like to end by saying that it is important for all CBD focal points, national focal points, to leverage support not only from the other divisions within their own ministry, but other ministry also. There are many other ministries which also play an important role in positive biodiversity outcomes. So we should try to work with all of them in the effective and efficient utilization of limited and scarce financial resources that we have. And this will also help in promoting convergent action to meet the mandate of several multilateral environmental agreements. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pant, for this very interesting information from UNDP India. And thank you to all our panelists for sharing your country progress, as well as actually best practices from each country. We have heard a lot of good practices on protected areas, landscapes, corridors, especially OECMs, restoration, community initiatives, and capacity building. And we also have a comment from one of our participants, Mr. Rajendra Suwal from WWF Nepal, and he has asked us to consider developing new dimensions in the wise use of natural resources, because this traditional system of protected areas is not working very well. We also have a comment from Professor Jing Zhu, who has asked us to share the presentation by Sunita. And at this moment, actually, if I may, I will revert to Sunita, Sunita, may I request if you could complete your presentation, please?
Thank you, Dr. Janita, and my sincere apology to all because of the internet connection. So give me a second just to share the slide where I stopped. Okay, so I think I stopped it here. So I'll just, but thank you so much for the all CBD focal persons. I have myself been highlighted, and with all the key highlights from the region from the last, because this is especially based on the 2018 and national reports. So on biodiversity loss, what I was saying was we are really on progressive path, and more efforts required to really meet this target. And if we see from the whole region from the last decade, the deforestation has significantly reduced, but we still need to focus on some critical habitats like rangeland and freshwater ecosystem, wetlands, on other few river ecosystem and other specific ecosystems in the region. So in the goal B, we have 6 targets, and the first one is this sustainable fisheries. The sustainable fisheries is one of the least target we have progressed with unsustainable practices and degrading habitats, and we really need to promote the sustainable fishery practices in the region. And the second one is sustainable agriculture, aquaculture, and forestry. And the region is really doing well. And one of the example from Pakistan can be well reflected, the Green Initiative program, where we have billion tsunami trees program. So we are doing well in target 7. But however, target 8 is not doing very well. Some countries, more than 50% of the countries, are on track and towards progressive pathway, but we need more actions to really have this all yellow into the green and even a blue pathway where we can exceed the target. So the target 9 is about the invasive species, where we want to control and reduce. And this is one of the least target, the last target we have achieved in the region. Many countries are having difficulties even to document and also have policies in place. So we really need to have more actions and progress towards target 9 on invasive species. Similarly, because the climate change in this region is very vivid, and we really need to have focused climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. There are a lot of efforts in the region, but still the region is a little bit behind in meeting this target. But there are very good examples from the region where we can say that we will achieve this target in the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework. So goal C is about the improving the status biodiversity by safeguarding our ecosystem, its species and genetic diversity. And this is also one of the target where we are not doing very well, but there are so many good actions and progress in place, especially at the policy level. We need more action, especially in practice, and try to conserve the threatened species. So here, if you can see the IUCN data sets in the over the critically endangered species, out of 300 critically endangered species, 240 species are decreasing trend, and where only we have 2 species in the stable condition and 5 increasing, but others we still need a lot of effort in terms of research and conservation. And target 13 is about the genetic diversity. This target is quite well in the region, and many countries have taken a lot of good efforts and actions to conserve the wild relatives of genetic diversity and also the domestic plants and both animal diversity in the region. So next one is this goal D, which is to enhance benefits to all. And this one is doing well, but still we need a little bit effort to conserve the ecosystem and also the safeguarding the ecosystem services. And similarly related to target 15 is ecosystem resilience, because most of the parts of this region is covered by mountains and freshwater ecosystem and wetlands. So these require a lot of restoration, and in the coming decade, the coming decade is the decade of restoration. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to really progress in target 15. The 16 target is about Nagoya Protocol, and we are very good in terms of Nagoya Protocol in some of the countries. So out of 8, 7 countries are party, and many are already have drafted the policies and plans. So it's just about pushing a little bit of putting effort and getting that endorsed protocol and then implementing on the ground. So the goal E, we have 17 national biodiversity action plans, and in this we have already achieved this because all the 8 countries have submitted that NBSAPs in 2018, and many are in very good progressive pathway towards the targets. The traditional knowledge, like the analysis shows that we need a little bit more effort in traditional knowledge and targets. And then about the sharing information, there was a little bit lack of information generation and sharing, but the countries are really putting a lot of effort. And here you can see in the GBIF database, many countries have already started to share the data sets in the public domain and for the access to the other countries and also to the public audience. So that's why I think we are really on track, but require a little bit of effort to achieve these targets. The last one is the financial mobilization. And here we can see the region has been able to attract a lot of national funding from the government itself, but also we have been able to have good funding from the international community. For instance, GVF is already financing NBSAPs and other also we have biofilm in India, Bhutan, Nepal. For instance, Myanmar's budget, if you see in the conservation sector, 65% increased since from 2014-15. And also we have good amount of funding from RAID and PLACE, and also Bhutan for life. We have good example for protected area system management, effectiveness and conservation. And also if we see Pakistan, we have a good international funding from Global Crop Trust. So with this, I would like to focus major on IG Target 11. If you see in the IG Target 11, the targets are the global target is 17, but each of the country, based on their context, have set their target differently. For instance, Afghanistan has 10%, Bangladesh put 8%, Bhutan already crossed the 17%. That's why they, rather than on quantitative, they have focused on qualitative, focusing on management effectiveness and corridors for in their qualitative target. China already 15, India 20, Myanmar, they set the target in 2010. So if we see based on 2018 6 national report, many countries are doing very well, even at the global and the regional level in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, also mentioned by Dr. Ruchi. We are really doing well in the IG target, and OECM is one of the options that we need to see because our this region is so much in the pathway of also development. So we need to have that green growth. And then in the CBD the website, if you see compared to the other region, our region is really towards the very good target and looks very green. And we also did very on the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, just focusing on the mountain areas. And it shows that as of 2020, we already have like 557 protected areas of different IUCN category. And if we see just in the last decade, we have already 16 protected area. So we really think that we are really on good progressive pathway for protected areas. And then because the countries were also supposed to report on SDGs, so based on many countries, the NBSAP and targets have explicitly mentioned that without these targets, we won't be able to achieve the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. And each of the targets are very intrinsically and extrinsically linked with SDG targets. So meeting these targets are the milestone towards the SDG for 2030. So gaps and the challenges, there were so many gaps and challenges, but I'll just highlight the major ones. So what we saw from the NBSAP and also from the national report is the limited data and capacity assessment reported by the country itself, and also the reporting formatting because they were not standard formatting to the CBD, and also the national versus the global targets because there were so many targets and it took like 3-4 years for the global organizations to set the targets, and we already lost some time. So there were variations in the global and the national and even the local targets, and also the timeline, because if we see, we just had 10 years to implement and achieve our targets, but like the funding, when the funding came to the national government, it was already like we lost 3-4 years, and then preparing the NBSAP, it took like 6. So we lost a lot of time in preparing this, so timeline is really important. What the analysis saw. And also the long-term research. Many countries have reported that there is very limited long-term research and data management system is quite poor, and we need to put more efforts in this regard so that we have good research and also feed updated information into the good management system at the national and also a regional scale. And also the reporting on program of work on mountain diversity as a thematic program. I think it needs a little bit more attention. All of the countries have mentioned very explicitly that mountains are very important. We need to have this, but there is a like separate reporting on mountain of program of work. So I think we need to more proactive and then highlight the mountains from this region and get attention for this region. And also already highlighted by the delegates from the region and also from Dr. Naim that there is need for the regional and bilateral collaboration. There are some regional collaboration, even including ICIMOD, going on, but I think for CBD implementation and target implementation, we need more proactiveness in a bilateral collaboration. So in the country also highlighted about the indirect and direct drivers. So if we see the country, the region is really having so many indirect drivers like prolonged conflict, political stability, and also the pandemic has hit us a lot. So, and then beside this, we also have ecosystem degradation, the economic growth, because the development is the priority for the region than conservation, and also the pollution, climate change, invasive species are some of the drivers that are hindering us to progress ahead. So now with this overview of the targets and also the gaps and challenges, I think we have a very good pathway and opportunity for the post-2020 biodiversity, global biodiversity framework, which has like 4 goals, and under each of the 4 goals, we have a total of 21 targets highlighting all the targets that we just discussed, 20 targets, including that our target 3rd is on protected areas in the region. So I think we have good opportunity to go ahead and contribute to this post-2020, which will be discussed and adopted in COP15 in October in Kunming, China. So with this, thank you so much for your contribution, all the delegates, representatives, and thank you to listening to us. Back to you, Dr. Janita.
Thank you, Sunita. And the presentation by Dr. Sunita Chowdhury will be uploaded on our event page, as well as perhaps we can share it with the participants in today's meeting via email. So we have about 5 minutes for question and answers to both the country panelists as well as to Dr. Sunita Chowdhury. If there are any questions, please do feel free to write them in the message box and to write the person whom you would want to answer. But we do have one question here from Said Muhammad Abu Bakr. He's talking about the upward movement of wildlife due to climate change. And this has been shown via camera traps in China and Pakistan. Are there any steps to protect wildlife from climate change impacts? If Mr. Raja, may I request if you could address this question, please? Perhaps Mr. Raja or Professor Yang Yongping?
Thank you, Janita. Yeah, we do have upward movement of the common leopard in the snow leopard habitat, but we also are feeling that there is a movement of snow leopard as well from the warmer areas in the region towards the cooler areas. So nowadays we are getting a lot of sightings of snow leopard in the area. Normally it was a very elusive species, but now we have many tourists giving us the mobile camera footage of the snow leopard. So that does indicate that, yeah, the species are moving towards the cooler areas from the warmer areas. And as far as the mitigation is concerned, government of Pakistan is trying to increase its carbon sinks by planting more, and also, we are mobilizing communities towards conservation. So we have certain programs in Pakistan in which the livestock depredation is being addressed. People are being compensated by the insurance programs so that the retaliatory killings are not there. Yeah, we are progressing towards that, but yeah, there is definitely a movement of species upwards towards a cooler climate.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. It seems like this is still a challenging issue to be dealt with.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, thank you so much. In terms of the query from Mr. Rajendra Suwal, I feel like there has been quite a bit of discussion on OECMs by India and Dr. Ruchi Pant as well. I wonder if this is, and I understand that the guidelines have been prepared for OECMs in India. And I wonder if this can be shared with the other participants from the other HKH countries as well. So perhaps Dr. Ruchi Pant or so Dr. Kerketa, there is a comment from Rajendra Suwal, Mr. Rajendra Suwal, and I was just saying that because the protected area system may not be effective for us in the HKH, and OECMs is something that India has taken forward very well. And I wonder if you could share some of the guidelines that you have used in your countries for OECMs.
I would like to share a point. Why not let us have a meeting on OECM, and maybe there I will brief the success story of the OECM and also the guideline we have followed. So I think this is my suggestion. So what will happen, instead of giving a report to a single person, then and there we can brief you, number one. Number two, we can also brief you about our success story of OECM and also the guideline we have followed. If it is agreeable, I think we can have a meeting with all the member countries of HKH. I think Ruchi ma'am also would agree.
I agree with you. I think another meeting or a workshop or a webinar can be organized, and we'll be very happy to partner with the ministry in India and all the counterparts. Also, I just want to add one point, Rajendra ji, that these guidelines are work in progress. So as we delve deeper into this subject, we find that there is a need to modify. We are currently working with the ministry to do that. I think Dr. Mathur also wants to join. He's the chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority, who has done extensive work in developing these guidelines. Dr. Mathur has raised his hand.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchi. Just to add that when we are talking of OECMs, there are two situations, one with the terrestrial areas and one with the coastal and marine. So while the terrestrial areas are common with all the HKH states, only few countries would be keen to look at coastal and marine. And India definitely is looking at both. And as my colleague, Dr. Karkata and Dr. Ruchi said, this is a very advanced stage of work in progress, but we would be very willing to share our experience and work with member countries of the region to find out that what is the possibility because I must reiterate here that what has been covered as a protected area cannot be then included as an OECM. So we need to be a little cautious on that. And there is a lot of scope for finding out new areas under OECM. And we would be very willing to work with any partners, either bilaterally or in any way which ICIMOD or you would like to do. So I reiterate India's commitment that we shall be working very happily to share our limited experience and to see that the OECM numbers grow up and the conservation space and estate enhances. Thank you very much for providing this impromptu intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirketa, Dr. Pant, and Dr. Mathur. Very interesting discussion on OECM. So there has been some clarifications on the topic of protected areas, but addressing the needs of the poor and marginalized. And if you can please continue to have the discussion in the message box. I would like to take this program forward with due respect to time and to go towards the summary and way forward. And so now I request our Deputy Director General, Ms. Isabella Coziel, to share the summary and way forward. Isabella, the screen is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon to His Excellency Sher Bahadur Deuba, Right Honourable Prime Minister of Nepal, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, Executive Secretary, to the Secretariat of the CBD, distinguished delegates and CBD focal persons from the ICIMOD regional member countries, dear participants and ICIMOD colleagues. Firstly, my sincere congratulations for making this event so rich in content and bringing a common voice for the mountains and the regions of Asia. And also for organizing this event on the International Day of the World Indigenous People with the theme of leaving no one behind. This serves as a very important reminder of the intricate dependencies between people and biodiversity. I'm very honored and privileged to have been part of this webinar. It has helped me understand the critical biodiversity issues of the region, as well as the opportunities and the great work done by our regional member countries on this very important issue. It was also a great inspiration to have had opening messages from the Right Honourable Prime Minister of Nepal and the Executive Secretary to the CBD, as well as all the presentations by distinguished delegates from the HKH countries and Asia. It helped me reflect on how important partnership and collaboration are in tackling this huge challenge of dwindling biodiversity. So let me appreciate your dedication, commitment, and contribution to the region and its biodiversity. As an attempt to summarize the discussions, and I will not claim that I have been able to cover all the issues, I will share 5 key messages that could go to the post-2020 biodiversity framework processes. So, firstly, the state of biodiversity is deteriorating globally. The situation is very serious, and our mountains are not immune to such changes. The time to act is now, and we have very little time left to save our exceptional and unique biodiversity. The post-2020 framework provides us with a new opportunity to really make a step change in this, moving forwards over the next decade. Mountain ecosystems are exceptionally important because of the rich and unique biodiversity they sustain, about which we have heard so much today. And this biodiversity underpins a very wide and very valuable range of goods and services, which underpin vital sectors for the economy, such as agriculture, energy, tourism, or health. One of the most important services, however, that biodiversity plays is sustaining water, crucial for life. And the mountains are, of course, sources of water for a staggeringly large number of people, 2 to 3 billion living downstream, and of course, millions of species and ecosystems. So thirdly, whilst HKH countries have made clearly significant progress about which we have heard much today, we have not yet been able to achieve all the anticipated and desired 20 Aichi targets. But as also we've heard today, the region does have many good practices and many champions that could be amplified and built on further, especially also in addressing the win-win around biodiversity and climate change. And we've heard about several measures about how we could achieve this win-win, such as through nature-based solutions or other effective area-based conservation measures. However, we also need to urgently bring forward and bring in further support to upscale our work in this area, because the challenges are enormous. So fourthly, the next 10 years is critical, and we need a stronger collective and consorted effort to ensure the sustainability of mountains and their biodiversity. Yet the draft Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework does not yet recognize mountains as key and vulnerable ecosystems. ICIMOD has been playing a very proactive role on this issue, including coordinating perspectives through forums such as this, as well as through the HKH Call to Action and other campaigns such as the HKH Glasgow campaign and Road to COP26, and various other pathways to COP15 of the CBD. And I think also we've heard about the potential and scope for further discussion and coordination around this issue. The time is therefore right to put additional collective effort to ensure that the HKH region gets due attention within international and regional fora, so that we can really this time create a step change for biodiversity and the vital services it underpins for us, for Indigenous people, but also for future generations. So finally, ICIMOD would like to propose that the suggestions reflected in this webinar today, that is seeking due attention for mountain biodiversity in the HKH region, to be considered as a common voice from the mountains by the CBD Secretariat, COP15, and all processes associated with the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework. Thank you very much for your kind participation today, your time, your contributions and commitments. Good afternoon and namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella, for the summary and way forward. For the closing remarks, I now kindly request Mr. Dhananjay Powder, Joint Secretary and Chief, Environment and Biodiversity Division at the Ministry of Forest and Environment, and the CBD Primary National Focal Person of the Government of Nepal for his remarks. Mr. Powder, the screen is yours.
Again, thank you, Dr. Janita. Respected Director General and Executive Secretary, CBD Focal Points, distinguished delegates from Hindukush Himalaya regions, countries, ICIMOD colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to ICIMOD for organizing this important webinar and providing me an opportunity to deliver closing remark. Actually, our respected Secretary of Ministry of Forest and Environment was supposed to deliver this closing remarks, but due to his unavoidable circumstances, he could not join this webinar. Again, I would like to thank. Nepal is rich in biodiversity at ecosystem, species, and genetic level, and is giving priority to conserve biodiversity inside and outside the protected areas. According to the richness, distribution, and significance, Nepal's biodiversity has been categorized as biodiversity inside protected areas, forest biodiversity outside protected areas, wetland biodiversity, rangeland biodiversity, agro biodiversity, and mountain biodiversity. Hindu-Kush Himalayan countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan, having a shared mountain ecosystem, are all parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity and are committed to conserve biodiversity and its sustainable use through effective implementation of the strategic plan for biodiversity. Significant progress has been made towards the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets. Implementation of Nepal National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, NBSAP, has been effective in Nepal due to implementation of international treaties and agreements on biodiversity, strengthening of regional cooperation for the restoration of biodiversity across transboundary scale, and national commitment to the conservation of biodiversity. The positive results indicate that many of the government level decisions and implementation processes, such as those concerning protected areas, forest policy, access to conservation of agro-biodiversity, CITES implementation, landscape level management, promotion of category of protected areas, and the reformed legislation all promote and support to the achievement of national targets of the NBSAP. However, at the same time, several national targets either have not been made or are likely to be made within 2020. Despite accelerating policy and management responses to the biodiversity crisis, political commitments and institutional management, provincial and local level are necessary to achieve the targets. Can you hear me, Dr. Janita?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. In Nepal, emerging issues on biodiversity conservation include collaboration, coordination, and communication, stakeholders' capacity and knowledge, compliance with policy provisions, integration with the planning processes within and outside the sector, increasing investment, resource leverage, and inadequate monitoring. Meanwhile, information and knowledge gap, agricultural commercialization, including land fallow, infrastructure development, both linear and non-linear expansion on forests and protected areas, resulting habitat fragmentation, forest degradation, climate change impacts, and developing shared vision and joint responsibility, especially on policy and program, are emerging challenges on it. In this context, future priority on biodiversity conservation in Nepal would be integration with plan and programs, capacity building, knowledge management, increasing investment, joint monitoring, and motivating stakeholders on conservation. Similarly, addressing drivers of biodiversity losses, threats, promoting sustainable management of forests, agriculture and aquatic resources, localizing biodiversity targets at the provincial level, establishment of national and provincial level biodiversity authority, and ensuring effective implementation of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework would be our priority. We work closely with ICIMOD and support regional program on transboundary landscape, such as Kanchenjunga landscape and Kailash Sacred landscape initiatives, and other initiatives on forest and watershed management. We will continue to work closely with ICIMOD for conservation and development of Nepal. I am fully confident that this event will be successful in achieving its objectives. help developing common understanding on issues, challenges, and priority actions for the conservation and sustainable utilization of biological resources, especially in mountainous countries like Nepal and others in the region. We have also heard from the message from our Right Honorable Prime Minister Nepal about his commitments to conserve biodiversity. So I believe that we will be able to implement future priority actions that I have mentioned, which will result effective conservation of our biological resources and our future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dhananjay sir, for your kind concluding remarks. We are now close to the end of our program today, and to give a vote of thanks, I call upon Dr. Nakul Chetri, the CBD focal person here at ICIMOD and Regional Program Manager of our Transboundary Landscapes Program. Nakulji, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Janita Gurung. Ms. Elizabeth Mrema, Executive Secretary, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, Dr. Pema Jamso, Director General, and Dr. Isabella Coelho, Deputy Director General, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, Mr. Dhananjay Paurel, Joint Secretary from the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal, respective representative from the regional member countries of Hindu Kush Himalayan region and Asia, the invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks for this important webinar. I, on behalf of International Center for Integrated Mountain Development and the entire team here together, I would like to also extend my hearty congratulations to the team and also vote of thanks to all speakers and participants for gracing your important work and sharing with us your wishes and country's reflection today. A big thank to you, Right Honorable Sebadu Deuba, Prime Minister of Nepal, for his encouraging greetings, the commitment for mountain on behalf of people of Nepal. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Ms. Elizabeth Mrema, Executive Secretary, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, for her emphasis on need to deal with drivers of change, including climate change in the mountain, for sustaining biodiversity. Further, we are also grateful to all the representatives of HK's member countries and Asia for their reflection on achievement towards Aichi target, setting priorities for next decade, and putting a common voice to need of attention for the mountain ecosystem. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Pema Jamsu and Director General, and also for contextualizing webinar, and Dr. Isabella Coelho, Deputy Director General, for her narratives as summary and way forward. Being Nepal as a host country, we always had the opportunity to get all desired support and facilitation. Therefore, special thanks and token of appreciation to Dr. Dhananjay Paurel, Joint Secretary and Chief of Environmental Biodiversity Division, Ministry of Forest and Environment, along with his team member. Last but not the least, my heartfelt appreciation to Prime Minister Office, CBD Secretariat, and organizing team from ICIMOD, along with all the country focal persons and country offices. A special mention from my side is a hard work of Sunita Chaudhary and constant support from Janita Gurung, Said Muhammad Abu Bakr, Indu Chitrakar, and Rez Raj Bhandari, among others. Dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to state all of your continuous support with various programs, but both for pre-events and during the Conference of Party meeting to be held in Kunming. We look forward for your kind and continuous support for bringing attention to HK's countries and also addressing the success and challenges together. We also seek your inputs in the presentation and the report that was shared by Sunita, as well as we have shared that as a PDF. And if there is any input, then we would like to get those input so that we can finalize and launch that report during Conference of Party meeting. We are happy to inform you that the publication on compendium of case studies and good practices on protected areas and other effective areas-based conservation measures from the South Asian sub-region will also be available soon. And with 20 case studies from South Asian sub-region have been documented as contribution towards Conference of Party Meeting 15. And jointly published by ICIMOD and UNDP, we appreciate collaboration with UNDP for this project, and have a nice lunch and day. And thank you very much. Over to you, Janita.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Naku. This brings us to the end of our program today. The post-event update and webinar recording will be uploaded on our website shortly. We will inform you once this is done. Meanwhile, please do follow us on social media. Thank you all once again for your participation in today's program, and we look forward to interacting with you in our upcoming events relating to the CBD COP15. So goodbye and namaste.